This is the day Europeans came together to divide Africa, and the world just watched it happen. Powerful nations gathered in a single room, drawing borders on maps, claiming lands, and deciding the fate of millions as if it were a game. Entire regions, rich with people, resources, and kingdoms, were parceled out on paper. Decisions that would shape centuries were made over meetings and treaties, with no one from the continent present. What happened in this conference would set the stage for a chain of events that would alter history forever. Context: why the Berlin Conference happened. By the late 19th century, Europe was in the midst of a furious scramble for power and wealth. Africa, largely unknown to Europeans beyond the coasts, had become a prize due to its vast natural resources: ivory, rubber, gold, and fertile land. European nations were competing fiercely, not only for wealth, but also for strategic dominance. Conflicts and rivalries were escalating, and the risk of war between European powers over African territories grew real. Otto von Bismarck, the Chancellor of Germany, saw an opportunity to manage this chaos. He invited leaders and diplomats from major European powers to Berlin in 1884 to establish rules for claiming African lands, hoping to prevent European conflicts and secure Germany's influence in Africa. The idea was to formalize colonization through legal treaties and agreements, creating the illusion of order and fairness. No African leaders were invited. Their kingdoms, cultures, and existing societies were completely ignored. The conference was purely a European negotiation, a game of maps, claims, and diplomacy that disregarded the lives of millions. The Berlin Conference would set a precedent for how Africa could be divided without any input from the people who actually lived there. Main events and decisions. The Berlin Conference began in November 1884 and continued until February 1885, hosted by Otto von Bismarck in Germany's capital. Representatives from the major European powers attended, including Germany, Britain, France, Portugal, Belgium, Italy, and Spain. Over several months, these diplomats negotiated the rules for claiming African territories, aiming to avoid conflict among themselves while maximizing their own influence. One of the conference's most significant outcomes was the principle of effective occupation. This rule required a European power to establish an official presence in a region through treaties, administration, or military force before it could claim ownership. Arbitrary borders were drawn across maps, often slicing through rivers, forests, and tribal lands, with no regard for local cultures or existing kingdoms. Leopold II of Belgium secured personal control over the Congo Free State, not as a Belgian colony, but as his private possession, setting a precedent for exploiting African lands for individual gain. Freedom of trade along major rivers, like the Congo and Niger, was agreed upon, benefiting European commerce. In total, the conference formalized Africa's division on paper, creating treaties and agreements that legitimized colonization before boots even touched the ground. These decisions would become the blueprint for European expansion, changing the map of Africa permanently and laying the foundation for future conflicts. Conflict and negotiations. While the Berlin Conference is often remembered as a diplomatic gathering, it was filled with tension, rivalry, and strategic maneuvering. European powers were fiercely competing for influence and territory, and each nation wanted to secure the richest lands before their rivals could claim them. Britain and France argued over West African territories, while Germany sought to expand its colonial reach in Central Africa. Portugal and Belgium were both determined to maintain claims along the Congo River, despite competing interests. Negotiations were often calculated and strategic. Lines were drawn arbitrarily on maps, with little regard for African geography, rivers, or tribal boundaries. The conference focused on legalistic agreements, treaties, and formal claims, creating a facade of order while ignoring the realities on the ground. Smaller powers like Italy and Spain pushed to secure scraps of territory, highlighting the competitive scramble for any available land. One of the most striking aspects of the negotiations was the contrast between meticulous paperwork and the complete disregard for African voices. Kingdoms, leaders, and communities across the continent were not consulted. Their futures were being decided over tables and maps. The conference's decisions, made in the comfort of European halls, were laying the groundwork for a system that would affect millions of lives. Yet the true impact of these negotiations was only beginning to unfold. The Berlin Conference ended in February 1885, but its decisions were only the beginning. Borders were drawn, treaties signed, and claims formalized. But what unfolded next would change Africa in ways no one in that room could have imagined. Kingdoms once thriving would face new powers, rivalries would intensify, and the continent's resources would become targets for exploitation. The maps created in Berlin were more than lines. They were the blueprint for a transformation that would ripple through generations. What followed was the start of a chain of events that would forever alter Africa's destiny. And this is only the beginning.